if I can have your attention. I know we are really packed in here, and this tells us that this was an important session to all of you. So thank you for being here. I think we got enough chairs now to go around, or we're close. So I would like to welcome you to Wisconsin Literacy session on TABE 11 and 12, Unwrapping the Mysteries.
You can hear me clap once. There.
It's like a Girl Scout jamboree. I'm just here to introduce our two speakers today. Jake Gerges is the Chief Examiner for the YWCA as well as their program guru. And yes, and he's from Milwaukee, also serving Racine County as of now and others in the future. And Ann Beeson, many of you recognize from New Readers Press. Oh, wow. And we test drove this session at my regional meeting a month or two ago, and the things I learned that were in TABE 11 and 12 that I never knew were there came out of what I learned from them, and they've even done more since then. So please welcome them and enjoy this session. Who's starting? Jake?
Oh, do we really need that?
I don't know, decide.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Are you good?
Especially when I'm yelling?
Can you hear us?
All right. My name is Jake Gerges. I work for the YWCA Southeast Wisconsin. My experience thus far in life, I've done adult education exclusively since I graduated from college. I've been doing this for almost 15 years. The programs that I've ran have graduated over 1,200 people. There's that horn I tooted for myself.
Yes.
I've been a chief GED testing examiner for 2 different Milwaukee County locations, and they've had substantial success and substantial amount of people go through the testing centers there. We also run the TABE testing for W2 in the region of Milwaukee, so we had to early adapt to the TABE 11 and 12. So I want to be clear that I am not the expert of experts on this. And some of the wording I use is not going to match up perfectly with what DRC says is the exact phrasing, right? I'm going to give you my experience because somebody asked me to give you my experience.
That was me.
At the regional conference, the funny part was Ann was presenting, and right about 15 minutes before, she goes, Jake, you want to say some things? I go, yeah, I will.
Which was after I called Ann and said, would you mind doing the morning instead of the afternoon tomorrow? And this is 9 o'clock at night. And she said yes. So bless their hearts. I also need to tell you, this is on Facebook Live right now. So follow if you care to.
Okay, and I'm Ann Beeson.
For later use as well, right?
It should be, yeah, it should be out there. You should be able
I
to
should have
find
wore a tie.
I'm Ann Beeson. I am an independent sales rep consultant. I've been working with customers in Wisconsin since 2002. I currently have a 5-state territory from here all the way down to Texas. I like to drive. But so the issue of a new test is something I've been kind of familiar with because I, of course, worked with a lot of you when we went to the new GED test. I certainly also am not an expert in the area of TABE, but when Marcia said, would you do a presentation on this new TABE 11 and 12, I said, well, I'm a history major, so I can do some research, right? So I did some of that and then used a bunch of different resources, and I did this presentation with Marcia for her folks, and I wanted to make it really clear, I'm not from Data Recognition Corporation, but what I care about more than anything else is what are the issues and problems for instructors working with students in the classroom. That's the most important thing. So sometimes when you look at stuff and it's an assessment, you need to just kind of look at it from the perspective as a teacher, not from the person who built it. But having said that, I do want to throw this out right now because we talked about this a couple of times. There are some online webinars at Data Recognition Corporation that are actually training about the new test. If you haven't sat through them or looked at them at your leisure, you probably want to do that. It'll just give you a good overview, from the perspective of the test publisher.
How many of you have taken a TABE 11 and 12?
So, ooh.
Everybody do this. If you want to have knowledge about what your students need to do and how they need to make gains, you need to see the material that they're being measured by. I can't say enough about how many people that are in high-ranking spots in different technical colleges or community-based organizations that have never taken a GED practice test. So, as a chief examiner, I can look up everybody too, so. So I do know that there aren't many people that actually do this stuff. So I recommend before you do anything, before you go take the, watch the stuff on the DRC stuff, give yourself the TABE test. It's not hard, it'll take you a couple hours, and you'll feel what the new test feels like.
It's probably good. I just.
Oh, cool.
How's that? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna try and do in this period of time that we're kind of covering. We're going to do just a quick broad overview of the test itself. So we kind of how it's set up, what it looks like for for the 11.10 or 11.12 version. Some of the key changes, how the test is sort of structured in general ways, and then also how the scoring is slightly different than the 9.10. So we want to talk just a little bit about that. At the very end, if we talk about this, we're going to talk a little bit about score boost for the TABE 11.12 that was published by New Readers Press is now starting to get released. So we'll just at the very end, we'll just kind of mention and talk about what that is and how that works. So, okay, so the big picture on this is the publisher. So Data Recognition Corporation. Everybody has a handout?
No.
She gives me one job.
One job.
Right.
I have it in a handout. I printed it yesterday. You're getting it. Okay. Because it came out of my printer.
Jake, carry this in there, she said.
Well, I guess that's all I asked him to do. Just carry it into the room. Okay. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, so that's fine. So I'll kind of talk about this while we're passing this around. So what we're really talking about, this is Data Recognition Corporation. Is the publisher of the test. As you know, it used to be a McGraw-Hill product. It's now Data Recognition out of Minneapolis. This was really needed. A new version of this test was really needed because I think 10 and 11 came out, if I remember correctly. I think it was 2007. So it's really a long time ago.
Yeah, just a second. So we made 75 copies of the handout, and it'll be available at the Wisconsin Literacy website, I'm assuming, at the end of this presentation.
Yes, yes. Okay, so with all of the changes that have happened with college and career readiness standards, as we know, like the GED test was aligned to the college and career readiness standards. Also, too, the TABE 11 and 12 really needs to better reflect what our students need to know going forward. So this, the timing of it was good. It's glad it was at least separated out from the GED a little bit, so we at least have 4 years under our belt.
In a practicing standpoint, though, how many of you felt that the old TABE test was like your old trusty? When the GED test changed, man, at least you could rest your head on the old TABE test so you kind of translate the stuff. Yeah, that's changed. It's changed. And you all asked for it. I asked for it. I was talking to the person from the Data Recognition Corp out there, and I said, I was really pushing, hey, this doesn't match up as well with the new GED test. I can't figure out what we need to improve on. So they gave us the new test. And here we sit now trying to figure out this. Do all of you have the same feeling that when the test changed? I did. I still do, actually. Trying to figure out what means what. You'll get it. You'll do it. You'll be fine. It's just you need to deliver more tests and you need to start to see where people fall. So I get it. My old trusty's gone too. and I had sleepless nights, and anybody that knows me knows that I just get ridiculous with data and start to do pivot tables and stuff and cross-correlate stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about what my findings were. And they're not necessarily the same thing that other people will report that their findings were, but I'll tell you a little bit of a workaround that I found in order to match up with what we needed to do. This is all my opinion, and it's what worked for my program.
Right. There is also, if you haven't already checked, there are a couple more TABE presentation. They're slightly different from each other. So, check your schedule because I think they might be tomorrow. I'm not positive, but you want to check your schedule because I think there's a couple other different presentations that are going on. So for more information, more details, that's the place to go.
So we're gonna get in the meat and potatoes of it now that we gave all the disclaimers. Now I'm gonna start giving you truth.
We're covered.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna just kind of back and forth on this. Somebody's left to go like this. It still is covering the NRS levels that are the same, okay? And it is broken down sort of in a hierarchy. So you'll see that the major outline are the domains, and we actually have visuals following this one, some nice pie charts, because we love visuals.
Those of you that are playing along at home, it's slide 11.
Yeah, slide 11. Okay. And it'll actually identify what those domains are. Underneath the domains are going to be the different categories that are covered. The skills are what we do with the students in the classroom, and that information actually comes when you complete the test. Those skills are still available on the 9-10.
Yeah, how many of you do paper versions of this test, or did paper versions of the 9-10?
Paper?
All right, so that was one of the downfalls of the paper version, right? The digital version, you get a nice little prescription at the end of it that you can work on. And with the paper version, you didn't always get that. So that's similar to that, but DRC now has it where you can scan in your tests, and it's cheaper than delivering it digitally, but that's how you get the prescription for the ailments, right? And once again, these are not technical phrases that are presented.
It's good enough.
So, but I kind of looked at it like this, like a flow chart, right? There's these big domains that need to happen. And then there's smaller categories that make up the domains, and then each one has a skill. So when you're doing each one of the questions, that is correlated with the skill that is either being improved or needing to improve on. So what I try to focus on in our program is I don't try to teach anything that they already know. I'm lazy. I'm trying to work smart, not hard. So, like the GD test, when you get that end report that comes out, a lot of places don't do anything with that. They just look at the score and go, well, we need to improve. No, don't work hard. Work smart. Focus on the stuff that they need to know and improve on that. But with this breakdown like this, you can see that there's a hierarchy of knowledge that builds up to the next level. So build the base, make sure the foundation is firm, and that will build into larger bases of knowledge. So if there's a gap, and when we get to slide 11, I'll show you that there's different emphases on different domains throughout the tests, right? So an e-book is not going to have the same emphasis as an A-book. There's going to be different skills and different depths of knowledge that need to be demonstrated in each one of those tests. That's what I got.
Right. And then what I can tell you from a perspective of a publisher, and you all probably know this because if you've been here for a while and you've seen how when the new GED test changed, what we wanted to do was what you really need to look for are correlations that are done by publishers, especially for the materials that you're using currently in your classroom. So what are your go-to products that are there? What you want to do is go to their website and look for their correlations. I know that New Readers Press has been working diligently to build correlations to the 11 and 12. So what you're looking for is essentially a crosswalk to what the score is on the 11-12 to the resources you're currently using and the new products that they're building at the same time. So you'll see a lot of 9 and 10 that's out there because people have used that. But basically what that'll do is give you a listing of exactly where those resources or those skills are in the resources you currently have in your classroom. Okay?
How many of you are instructors in here? All right, so I've overseen a lot of instructors in my life. One thing that I ask of you, please, if you want to service your students right, I mean, that's why you do this. And some of you have some really great old material. And I'm never going to tell a teacher not to use that material, but if you're going to use that material, you have to do the work. You have to cross-correlate it to what's being assessed. It's okay to use old material, but don't take away from your students by not doing the legwork and knowing how that impacts their improvement in their academic skills. So it's going to take a little bit of extra to figure that out,
Right.
But that's, if you truly are doing like the right thing for your students, that's what you have to do. So this is one of those times that we have to buckle up, we have to get to a lower gear, and it's going to take a lot of extra work that's not just instruction. It's
Right.
going to take some office time to get to the spot where they're making improvements on these levels.
I can actually give you some first-hand experience for those of you that have resources that you knew, because there's always going to be something you have that's great, and you know it's great because it works, right? And it might be a little bit old, but it works well for your students. What you need to be able to do is just identify what the skill is that's being taught and see how that translates back and forth, and you need to just be able to identify or do that correlation yourself, which says, this is the skill at TABE M reading. This is the skill, and this is how you can find it in what resource you're using. So just be able to identify that. That'll help not only you, but others. Publishers that do current stuff actually make that for you. So, and from someone who's firsthand experience doing correlations for a whole year, I don't recommend that, by the way, it's really boring. But if you do have questions about it, feel free to email me or call me, and I'm happy to talk to you about it on how to do that, because I actually did it for a company for, like I said, for a whole year. Okay, so we know that this test is much more rigorous and more demanding. So the feedback generally that I'm hearing from different states, different programs, anybody that's using the TABE, I'm hearing that a lot of students who are scoring originally, let's just use an example, may originally be scoring it using the D level, tend to be now scoring a little bit closer to the M. So, and we can talk about that a little bit more, but I know that there seems to be a bit of a drop. And logically, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense though, because we need to ramp up a little bit overall. We started to do it with the GED, but now this is sort of coming down a little bit lower. So we do need to seriously ramp up what we're doing for our students.
Vibrator.
What?
We talked before we did this, like, I like how you interject in that stuff, and she was like, usually I can tell that you want to do that, and I go, well, why? I go, because you sit there and vibrate. Like, you sit there just going, oh yeah. When you look at what the college and career readiness standards are, it is not what's been taught in the past. So we got to get the idea that this test, compared to the old test, it's not the same test, it's not the same assessment, it's measuring different things. Mm-hmm. The college and career readiness standards, I went to a meeting one time where a guy from the state said the millennials and below them are going to have to produce more product with less people at a higher skill level. And I said, is that it? Is that all we have to do? So we are now measuring the next level of education, what the careers are going to be down the road, what we need to be trained in that. And frankly, the cognition that's needed in this new GED test was not something that was taught to me when I was in high school. I would read information, I'd spit it back up on a piece of paper, I wouldn't have to use how many of you know computers enough that I can use a little bit of computer? So you got RAM, right? You got this random access memory, and your stuff's sitting up on your chips, right? But sometimes you need to use the stuff you just read up on your computer chips, right? And then you got to pull back into knowledge you already had. That's some hard stuff. But that's what we do every day. When we're feeding off each other right here, I'm taking the buy-in in the room right now, I'm putting it back in my back knowledge to figure out what to say. And that's what we really need to train our students to do. We need them to pull back on past knowledge and then apply it to the everyday situation that's going on. And that's hard to teach, that's hard to learn, and it's hard to assess. So this test is different. It is more, you're gonna hear difficult, right? Man, this is hard. But that's what we have to start measuring, because that's the end goal that we're trying to produce. We are all being compensated to make a widget of some sort, and this is the assessment that's currently approved to measure those widgets.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to just skip down to employability skills that are embedded throughout. One of the things, I've heard this over and over, we owe another time, right? Okay, just take the concept and just go, look for resources that embed in the resources employability, workforce kinds of things, okay? So anything that is contextualized, in other words, where we're learning about math, but we're putting it in a context of a job, which would have been a great thing in high school if I had that. But, because you want to ask the question, why am I learning this? And that's the thing that you actually find when you see contextualized learning, especially towards a workplace. So because the employability skills standards are actually incorporated within not only the GED, but in the TABE as well, you kind of want to work that in here and there when you can find those kind of samples, not just strictly academic, but what's the world like when you're done with school?
Those of you that studied andragogy, which is one of the founding principles of adult education, you're going to find out that this is best practice. Putting stuff in there that they care about will make them learn better, or help them learn better. If it's not pertinent to your students, they will not pay attention to you. So this is a great way to add this into the assessment, which wasn't always there.
Right, right. And then when we were putting this together, Jake was talking about that there's different calculators you kind of need for different levels, because the math will actually have two parts to it, with and without the calculator. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything.
One's a more basic calculator, and one's an advanced mathematical calculator. They're not the same calculators that you use in your GED testing center, though.
Too bad.
So that's a difference if you're giving the paper version of the exam. We didn't talk about the breakdown of the test, right?
No.
Okay. So yeah, you need two different kinds of calculators, so you should look into that if you haven't already.
We don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that.
Right.
Okay, so the result of this slide, we were writing it up, we started laughing. We were trying to figure out how to phrase this last line on this slide. It's longer. Okay, it takes a little bit longer.
How many of you have a certain orientation process that you've done since the beginning of time? And that orientation process was just polished, right? You got people in, you polished them up, you got them their test, they felt good, you read them the assessment, you told them what they needed to do, the next steps, boom. Yeah, you're changing that. You're changing that. And if you look at the amount of time that this examination takes, the days of the old survey, the survey format of this test, that's not there anymore. So you are going to need to, especially if you do testing in a certain syncopation, you're going to have to adjust the syncopation that you're doing in program entry. How many of you have actually changed to 11 and 12 already?
I know, yeah.
Well, there's a difference between have to and did. This is adult education, right?
Yeah, so that's... Okay. Did you want to ask a question?
Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Why are there no skill levels? Why is it just a statement score? Why is it just a 400 or 565? Why did they do away with those, 12.9 plus or 8.3s? That's really hard as a teacher to really place a student.
We're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
Yes. Thank you.
I too struggled mightily with that.
Because I just created one on the side, and then, I'm like, why do I? Okay, so you'll talk about
Yeah,
that.
well, we have a nice visual for you.
Okay.
That'll be good.
I want to say this real quick though, just so I don't forget this. Your concept of what a grade equivalency is shifted because the test and the assessment has changed.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but it took me a long time to actually lower the shoulders. Old trusty, once again, old trusty isn't the same no more.
There is one thing I want to say before we go.
I'm sorry,
We're going to do that. Okay. This is a Wisconsin literacy meeting. However, I put money on the fact that there's a whole bunch of non-Wisconsin literacy people in the room, like technical college people. Can you raise your hand if you're technical college? Okay. Okay. So, this is the important part when you think about when you have to give the TABE to the students coming in. Please check with the powers that be, because it is not a requirement that every student be tested on every subject the minute they walk in the door. It's really important that you make sure. So those of you that are testing your students on every single subject, you don't necessarily have to do that. And so please check and make sure that you have to eventually do it. But up front, maybe all you have to do is just a reading test up front. And this was a quick conversation I had this morning with Mark Johnson. So make sure you double check that, because you know what's going to happen if you give them 8 hours of testing the minute they walk in the door. Are you going to see them again?
They get through 3 hours and leave?
I would,
Yeah.
All right.
So the TABE is broken down into these 3 basic areas that you always remembered it, right? The math is broken down into 2 sections, and when I asked DRC, the reason behind that is that people might need a break. A lot of reading. They need to clear that RAM for a second, right? Shake the head out and not have that stuff just rattling around. Too many letters, too many words.
It literally just, it just says stop in the bottom right-hand corner. And it just means just stop. So you can take a break, stand up, walk around. You know.
Yeah, like I said, if you're delivering the math part by paper, you know that there's a part with a calculator, there's a part without it. Those of you that are doing this digitally, and just let it ride, right? They get in there, they're doing the test, it does it automatically, they give them access to the stuff. At the end of it, this is the part where we said no grade equivalencies. So there are scale scores and there are NRS levels. Now, in my experience, let's get back to it. We got a little bit to show like how this stuff's broken down into the other parts, but we're gonna get back to this one in 2 seconds.
You weren't going to do that in my humble experience thing right now?
Oh yeah, there's a huge disclaimer. And I am just a dude that gives a lot of tapes. So I am not an expert by any means, but the days of the grade equivalency, how many of you actually thought in the other test that the grade equivalency at 7 or 9 was a 9th grader reading in 9th grade? Now we just kind of like, we got used to that being the thing. And frankly, when you had a student that came in at a 4th grade reading level, and they look at you and they went, "You mean to tell me I'm a 4th grader?" All of you backtrack from it then. You know, like, no, you have the skill set of somebody that's in a number 4, 12th grade system. You wouldn't tell them that they're only reading at a 4th grader.
Right, right.
So that part isn't the same as it used to be, and there's a general reference to it by DRC. But my experience, in my humble experience, this is not the DRC's word, but in my humble experience, so far what I've seen is the scale score. When you give that to a student, they accept it, and then there isn't that awkwardness.
Yeah.
You tell them what their scale score is, you tell them the NRS level they're in, and then you explain what the NRS level is. You just tell them what's in that level. Because that's probably how we should have been doing it, because it was off-putting to them when we told them they were reading at a 4th grader level.
Well, and the reality is, though, it's irrelevant. All we really want to know is where are they starting? Because we want to be able to give them resources that match where they're at to start where they can build up. So that first score doesn't really even matter. Whatever it is fine. Maybe they had a bad day, you can work with that later. But the fact of the matter is that we just need to find out where, because we don't want to have somebody come in and you say, oh, you know, I dropped out of high school at the middle of 12th grade or whatever, but you know what, I was disconnected with school 3 years before that, so my reading level is really low. And maybe I'm reading at a 6th or 7th grade reading level. Well, you give me a GED book without a test, you know, and I'm going to be struggling right away and probably not going to come back, you know, because it's just too hard. You know, so what we really want to be able to do is hone in, find out what they need, and then get them in the right direction.
Yeah. So in practice, I haven't had, besides my own like insecurity or my own self-security, I haven't had a huge issue now that the grade equivalency is gone. Because I just found a different way to phrase their assessment.
Right.
And I found it actually to be an easier way to relate to people. So now, now this is where I get into opinion. So, we had a program written that needed a 6.0 to get into.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
And the tests are different. They're not the same. What breaks down the new test to get through college and career readiness standards, I kind of looked at it like it's a different rubber band even. You know, like if you spread out the rubber band of the old test and you spread out the new one, it's a different length than rubber band. So we have to change the concept of what we're talking about. And I think that's a pretty good reason why the NRS, why they didn't give the grade equivalencies, because they're not equal to each other anymore. So we had it where we had, this is not approved through DRC, I got freaked out. Somebody from DRC was sitting in here. So what we did was we tried to go back to common assessments that we've used in the past to figure out where they place in the new assessment. So what we did was we got a bunch of people. We needed a 6.0 to get into our HSED 509 program. Little plug, we're doing a conversation tomorrow. I'm presenting again. I'm not going to be wearing a gray shirt and sweating so much. So we had to do this. We had to do a kind of crosswalk between the assessments that we already knew and the new assessment. So what I did was I went through a huge bunch of database, made a great pivot table. Everyone enjoyed that part. And I came up that the 6.0 people were coming into our class ended up becoming a 137 on average in reading in the practice GED examination. We made every one of our students do a practice GED exam because we didn't want them going in if they could pass the test, and if all of a sudden there was something really dramatic that was bad, we also needed to make sure that we pushed them up to the level that they needed to be at. So 137 is where we found as our focal point, or a fulcrum maybe, in the crosswalk. So when that happened, we brought in people that, it was coincidentally, it happened right at the end of the semester, right? So we post-tape people and we got the new people to come in the 11 and 12. And what we found from our population was that the people that scored a 137 on the practice test scored right below a level 3 in reading and math. Right below it, not that level, but we were afraid to go around and say, you need a 508 to get into the program. We didn't want to confuse people about what the cutoff was, so we decided that level 3 for math and reading was the acceptable point into our program. We put that as our reference point to it. We rewrote our 509 program, or renewed it, and the state accepted the level 3 as our entry point at a 6.0.
So level 3 meaning level 3
Level
of
3
NRS?
the NRS score.
NRS level 3.
What number is that? Is that a 3 or 400?
Out of 6?
It's
It's level 3 out of
Like I said,
6 levels at the NRS.
It was confusing because in one book it was a 508, in another book it was a 486, 496, and then in math and reading it was different. So we just went with a generalized level 3. If you place into that in an M book, a D book, or an A, well, actually A book would be too high now, but an M and a D book. So what I'm saying in that situation, and why I said that, was that I challenge you to use the data that you already have, and the people that are continuing your program, to cross-reference back, to figure out what your acceptable rate is at the new examination. Does that make sense?
We were playing around with visuals and we thought this was cool.
So we
And then he
met for
taught me
4 hours
something.
last Friday. So what we thought about this was that the locator test is given for each one of the subject areas, right? The reason that we do that is because each subject area has different, I was pictured like this. You're at a carnival, right? You come walking into the carnival and they got those little hammer games. So if I give my son Hercules' hammer and I tell him to hit the thing, he's not going to do anything, right? But if I give Hercules my kid's hammer and he goes and duffs the ebook, he's going to blow the top off the bell. So we want to make sure that people are using the right hammer at the right skill set to make sure that we're getting a proper assessment. The one thing that gets people crazy is when they come in and do a 4-hour test and they score out of the book and their test scores aren't accurate, you can't use them. So ultimately, standardizing the test, making sure it's delivered uniformly inside of your setting in a quiet, comfortable environment, and making sure that they're placed in the proper test will get you accurate results in which you can hopefully show larger gains in. So the locator test is identified through in each one of the books. And each one of the books, actually there's an L level as well. But we didn't really go into that much. There's a low literacy level 1 for reading.
Is it oral?
No, it's a lot of pictures, and you fill out the actual test booklet.
What does the locator add in terms of resource additions, in terms of cost and time?
The locator is part of the assessment that you give. So if you're paying for an application of the TABE, it's built into the cost of the
You
application.
do it online, but paper pencil is exception.
Yeah, so I gotta walk my comment back. If you're, for my program, the 509, right, it's acceptable for us just to use a level M book, right? So, because that's the basis of knowledge that we need to utilize in order to show that they can do the work, right? But when you're giving a general enrollment and you don't the GED, or you're talking about putting them in like a pathway with construction or something like that, utilizing the TABE test, or utilizing the locator test, is already built into the cost of the TABE, and I don't see a reason not to use it when you're doing an online application of it.
Right, or online. So the question is, with each pencil, it is an additional cost for those booklets and an additional cost for the time.
I would assume so.
And so I just don't know enough, so I'm asking here if you know what the cost is. Time to do the look portion on each pencil and
We don't have to do anything having to do with money.
Well, it does.
First cost.
Time,
You need to contact
yeah,
them.
inside of this presentation, and it is considerably longer. And let's not beat around any bush when we say this. Time is a restriction that happens in this test. It is long, it is vigorous, and people will tell you that. Yeah.
So you say you use the M level. So is a 508 at the M level the same as a 508 at the D level?
In theory.
Because for me, the TABE has always been based on content. An M level reaches a certain content and it goes above that, which means if you were, I think the old TABE was 5.9, which if you got a 9.9 means you're really good at 5.9 grade level stuff.
That's still accurate as far as it goes, that each level has a certain right. You know, and then when it goes, so if you look at the forms that you bought with the TABE booklets, there's a thing called standard errors of measure, and it's on a bell curve, right? If you get into an A book and you only get 6 right, the likelihood that test is going to be accurate is low. Then there's a sweet spot in that bell curve that shows where you want to be testing. Now, DRC and through the NRS standards, right, getting them approved for that, they have an area that's acceptable through scale scores that says even though that you may have been in a higher level or a lower level book, the test is still accurate. So any one of the ones that are digitally printed out that actually give the level score at the end of it, those are considered acceptable. They make recommendations though then when you do the paper and pencil version, where it starts doing the plus or minus at the end, that you to get a more accurate score, you'd want to drop down or go up a book. So you can score out of the accuracy range of it, but I found this test, not as many people drastically score out of these books as in the past. Maybe it's because it's a longer assessment and you got a better time, or more time to kind of get the right zone. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, this was just really basically, we just wanted to talk about what the different answer types are. So it's primarily multiple choice, which is pretty standard on most of them. Evidence-based selected response, there's going to be a reading where it's going to ask you a question. The second part of that question is, how did you know the answer to the first part? Okay, so they're they go like this.
So what does that mean though if they get the first part wrong?
Right. Did everyone hear that? You get the first one wrong, you absolutely getting the second one.
Is one of the choices on the second one, I guess? Because that would be my standard student's answer.
You're right, exactly.
So a lot of this technology-enabled questioning, you've all had to go through and explain this technology stuff, the drop and drag, the matching, the click, and the drop-down menus. You've had to explain this to your students in the past for GED stuff. It's very similar to the same application as the GED examination. So it's the drop or click up menus, it's the grab this, drag this to this spot, it's the identify the spot on the map. This was the time that we were talking about before about the locator examination. This is a breakdown of the tests. They all end up averaging out to, I believe, the same amount of time to deliver the full portion of it. If you bought the test originally early on and got your first printout, the times have changed. So you want to make sure that you have the most accurate, up-to-date timing for these tests. These are in your guys' pamphlet, and anybody that's delivering this should have had to have purchased the test booklets, and they send you an email with the stuff inside of it. So just make sure you're delivering it according to the standards. Frankly, people aren't taking as long to do these exams as it says on here. They're going considerably quicker. These are the maximum, I'm not saying it was the maximum allowable time. That doesn't mean that's the time that everybody will do, which makes giving the paper version sometimes difficult when people are in different spots. But
And just so you know, this information that was basically, I downloaded it either from the data recognition website or a PowerPoint from one of the national consultant. Oh, visuals.
right. So when we were talking about those overarching knowledge points, right? They were, what was the word you used?
Domains.
Domains. You can see that the domains here are different according to what level book you're taking. So if you looked at the importance or the measurement of the domains, they change according to the level of the score or the level of the books in, the difficulty level. So what I'm saying on this though, is if you want to maximize your NRS level increases, you can see that integration of knowledge and ideas, when they give you the prescription on that, potentially you can focus on the ones that are more largely measured, those skill sets that are lacking, and that way you can ensure that when they take the test, they can get, you're hedging your bets, right? Back to working hard and not smart, or smart?
Smart,
But this is where you concentrate.
Concentrate on this one and this one, and you get the majority of your return on that.
Yep. Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on the previous screen, when I see the readouts and it says that someone needs work in the craft and structure, what are the skills specifically then that addresses that issue?
Okay, so what it is this is just a visual of the domains, the general areas at each level for each area. So language, reading, and the math.
So is there a further breakdown?
Yes,
Yes.
this is the big, domains on the
more.
top. Then it was, what was the second I can't remember.
2 more downs.
Yeah, and it's,
Then you haven't been able to access that yet.
well, you should be able to see the skills
Are you
because
doing,
your results.
are you doing paper and pen, or are you doing paper and pencil? So
And we're just learning this.
there is a very, very, very technical document that you've had to purchase that actually does break that down.
They have it, but
It's insane to read. Sorry, the online version of it is considerably easier because they just give you it printed out for you.
Yeah.
But that information is in the packets that you got. That's one of those big books that are 250 pages long.
So if we have the paper pencil chat, can we access the information for the online information so that we at least get printed information?
So
No.
well, it depends how you're grading your paper and pencil version. There's a
Right.
scanned version that gives you access to this. But yeah, that should be. I mean,
Yeah.
that's.
The individual profile report has domain, skill, and category. The category is a questionable scoring element because it lists available skills, but it's clearly printed when you
That's right. Yeah, and that does get produced with the scanned version of it.
Need to clarify each step. So we get whether they're non-proficient, partially proficient, or proficient as far as domains. When you flip the page over, you can see all those skills, but we don't really know which skill they were proficient in. That's how that's as far as I can get for a people that get.
So it's where I've had the debate with Ange. We had a slide up there that said something very similar to that, where it's more rigorous. And I understand exactly what you're saying as far as is it a cumulative list of everything that's under that, that skill set, or is it just what they need to work on? And there's a great DRC presentation coming up that'll answer all these great questions, and it's super depth.
Yes, some of the things. And it's always going to be an issue if you're using paper and pencil and you want a really quick, accurate description. It's going to take work. That's what you're paying for actually for the online version of it, is that it's automatically going to generate that for you. So it is going to require a little bit.
But I don't think it automatically tells you the skills in the officer. It just says what all those skills are. So we don't know, I should work on that skill, or that skill wasn't.
You don't know which skills that student has.
Oh, yeah. Okay, because I will talk about that at the end.
Well, that's kind of
Right.
We're not trying to overly plug any product here, but Anne will get to a point where there's a product that she's got right now that does have, when you do the practice stuff, there is a breakdown of it, which questions asked which, and then it goes back to the actual page in the score boost.
Yeah.
So it's not the
15 minutes.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
So your timing on your tests, I'm gonna back up a little bit, did not talk about the sample questions. So like when I give the reading with locator, online, it says reading locator, sample questions, part 1, part 2. Honestly, I'm skipping the sample because there's no scoring on it.
Right, and they know
have
how
no
to do it.
idea, it's total, so instead what I'm doing, I'm using the online tools on a board like this ahead of time on a smart board, and I'm giving a quick 5-minute presentation about the tools before they take the locator.
Bullseye. Perfect.
So
That makes total sense to me.
I'm a nerd, right? Because I early adapt and then I don't have anybody to ask the questions to. So the problem is I read all the books. And frankly, when you're delivering this test, paper and pencil, you're supposed to be reading verbatim from a 45-page book that tells you exactly, I mean, all of those things. Now, in application, I'm not, this is not the view of DRC, but yes, you do stuff that works quickly and it makes sense, and you know that it gets the people the information that they need. But that, if you're asking for best practices and practice that they ask for, ultimately you're supposed to read all these things, give them a moment to sample it. And that would add substantial time to each
Okay, so
section.
there's supposed to be a reading part that goes along with the online part?
If you're doing the online version of it, it's just kind of self-tracked, right? It doesn't.
Instructions are right there.
Yeah.
Instructions are there.
The directions are there, but as they go through the sample questions, they don't know if they've got them right or wrong. In the paper version, I think it tells the instructor now, check over it, and these are the answers kind of thing, so.
We'll have an off.
Okay.
Not in front of 100 people. I'll look at them.
And a
Okay?
sign.
Right.
Yes.
So just,
They don't know.
can you, just 1 second? So I just put a few of these pie charts out, but I did want to put the website, and I don't think you're going to be able to read it in the handout. Okay, but it's http://tabetest.com. So you can download, and then the rest of it is /PDF, those are PDF in capitals and small s, /TABE blueprint.
So if you Google search TABE blueprints,
Yep,
that will come up.
Yep.
You'll be able to find those. It'll be on DRC's website.
that would have been easier.
4 hours of talking, we didn't figure that one out. It's amazing when you get in front of people how things change.
Okay, so each one of these sort of kind of give you, and it's more importantly, it's good to make sure you've got the large domains in your head as you look at the information, because what it'll allow you to do is make sure that you can always sort that information for your students, that you're getting at exactly what they need for the particular instruction.
On the math, M and D, on the math practice questions for the M, they have the students practice the grid, where they come up with an answer, they have to fill in the grid and then bubble in the answer. But there are no grid questions on the actual test question when they do it. On the D level, they have to fill in the grid portion on the actual test part, but there is no practice. And so then most of the students nowadays have never seen that grid process because that used to be on the old GED.
I would highly recommend that you talk to the data recognition rep. Because she's here today, she's got a table.
When I did my first grid, on the D level, they stopped and said, what does this grid mean? So then I would draw it on the board and say, this is what the slash means.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would definitely just, ask her.
Sounds like you found the. Yeah.
And most publishers really want to hear that stuff. I mean, that's how it is for who I work with. They always want to know when there's something that's goofy or wrong.
So I did my first group blind, so I see what the flaws are, and then I know how to instruct them before they even begin the test.
Sure, absolutely.
Head off the problems ahead of
Right on.
the game.
So.
Did I say I was going to talk about this?
No, you
10
didn't.
minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes.
So, we're gonna talk for about 2 more minutes, well,
I'm
and,
gonna get this, this is gonna be done in 30 seconds, okay?
yeah.
I'm
And everyone's gonna understand this perfectly. So, are you doing it?
I can do it, watch, and then you enhance me. Okay, all right, here we go. Okay, put aside the grade levels. Scale scores, if you are an assessment company and you want to make sure that different forms of the same level test are equivalent to each other, what you want to be able to do is assign a point value to each question, and then you come up with a point value or a scale score for a particular version of a test. This is how assessment people identify how, this version of M reading and this of M reading, different versions are equal to each other. Because, okay, you don't have to flashback, but this is a good example. Remember the OPT? Form PA, PB, PC of the old official practice test of GED. Okay, and then they come out with new versions of the test all the time. And I'd walk around, I'd talk to customers, and they'd say, oh, that PA level, that was so easy. PB is impossible. So it's really, yeah, but in some cases it may very well be because it was just a practice test. But assessment people want to make sure that different forms of the same test are equivalent to each other. Because you don't want to give somebody a really hard test and then a really easy test as a post-test and then blow the door off because it's not accurate. So that's essentially why the scale scores are, why they're used and why, and then I think we're going to...
So real quick, as an enhancement to that, that's where that standard error measure that we were talking about before goes into play. It's like a poll, right? The Marquette Law poll says this, and there's a plus and minus error. So that standard error measure from the different forms would say this is plus or minus the likelihood that they're within a certain range of this. So if you're in an A book,
Yep.
the 508 might have an error of 36 points, right? So up or down 36 points. Where the other one, that might be the sweet spot, it might be only a 12-point margin of error. And the one below that might have a 48-point margin of error, even though the scale score is still the same, the standard error measure changes.
Great.
I'm fun at parties too.
Okay, I think what we're going to do is zip through these because you know why? I want to get to the one that has that scale scores on it. Can we do it like that? Okay, so these also are all on the data recognition website. This will actually help you because this will actually give you some of the content areas that are involved. So I'm just going to zip through this real quick. This is what I think yeah. So this might hone in a little bit on what you were talking about. Okay? So, I don't know if you can actually see this. And this is from them also.
Yeah, no, this is the official. So everyone wanted a grade equivalency, right? So this was the thing that was produced according to the new examinations. This one's for the reading test because we didn't want to put 3 up there so you can see them. But so if you give somebody the assessment in the old book and you give somebody the new assessment, they are going to not score in the same areas, the same grade equivalencies. It's just that's my experience.
9-10 through versus 11 and 12.
Because it's a different kind of assessment. It's measuring different things. Some of us though, like I do reporting for W2 and I go to the black screen, that's an old terminal CARES screen and it's flashing at you and it absolutely has to take a number in order to move forward. You can utilize this for that, this chart. So if they get a scale score within here, you can say that they have the grade equivalency score of this. And you can utilize this moving forward if you've never given this test before, you're not referencing back to the 9-10, your knowledge of the 9-10. But for real, you have to flush out of your mind what the old grade equivalency are. If you're going to use this, this is not the old grade equivalency. They do not equal each other, and you will be disappointed in a student's production if you use this in comparison to the old scores, the old grade equivalencies.
If I was going to fix anything on there, I'd change that K to an L for literacy. But that would be me.
And if you layered this one more time, the accuracy on these books, like the books that would be measuring this stuff, and the sweet spots for each one of them, would be like the A, B, I can't reach higher, but you can see how I'm kind of tweaking them.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of look at it, whether or not it's an accurate score in the right book and it's in the right area. You can also see that that's still 6 to 8. It's still that huge, hard number. You get somebody in there, you're like, dang it. NRS 4, you're going to get me again. I'm going to say out of experience again, people are going to be in NRS levels longer with this assessment.
Yeah.
We are measuring the top end. The top end of here wasn't necessarily being measured in the old books. Why? Because this is the level now, the college and career readiness standards, it's one extra tier. So the rubber band, if you pull the rubber band, that's how it,
It must be 13 and 14 or something.
they still use the same grading, so it's difficult to understand that. But I got to be clear about this. When the old GD test changed to the new one, we all thought we wouldn't get a grip of it. We thought we wouldn't handle it right. This is what it is. And it's what we need to use to show NRS level increases.
Well, and there is a treasure trove of tools inside of what we've got. I didn't know this till you guys pointed it out. Lesson plans and all kinds of cool stuff that they've provided for us.
Okay, so my whole goal is to get you out of here 3 minutes early, which leaves me exactly 2 minutes, right?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. Okay, so here's what I'm just going to tell you. If you are interested in this, please stop by the booth, fill out a sample request form, and I will send you samples of score boosts for table 11 and 12. I want to thank Wisconsin folks because I thought of this 2 years ago and called New Readers Press and said, OMG, would you please build this product? And they did it. So what this is just a sampler of it. What it does, for those of you that are kind of familiar with, just pass that behind you. Thanks. If you're familiar with score boosts for the GED test, what it does is you use it for post-testing. Thank you. Can I pass this to you? Just
Well, here too.
the most important thing I think that would actually be really helpful for you is that there is actually a guide in here that walks you through to identify what the students need to work on. Okay?
And real quick, this is on here. There's a post test before you give your actual TABE test.
Yes.
And it actually itemizes it back to the page. So if they get a certain question wrong, you can actually go back and itemize it to the page in this book, and you can work on the skills. And I haven't seen that yet for any other material.
M&D is out right now. M&D Math is coming out in 2 weeks. A and E are coming out in January and February. When you fill out that sample request form, just fill it out, check what it is you're interested in. If I have a sample for you, I'll give it to you. If not, I'll ship it to you. We're done.
Thank you.